Hello and welcome to the Walk Around podcast, powered by JM&A Group. Actually, no, we're on LinkedIn Live.
It's a little different, Mark.
It is a little different. Welcome. We're trying to expand our channels and find new ways to give you the innovation and the latest trends in automotive. I am Mark Spoto, and with me is Jonathan Jordan, our Director of Performance Development Services. Hello, Jonathan.
Hey, Mark. This feels a little different. We're usually in the same room. We're usually not live. That's a little different.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
We're trying something new. Let's see how it goes. You know, before we get into it, Jonathan, it is a very special day for you. It is your birthday. Happy birthday, and thanks for
thank you.
spending this special time with me and talking about trends.
There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Well, that may not be true, but glad to be here with you.
Hey, by the way, you also share a birthday with some other famous stars. I mean, you're a star in our heart, Jonathan. But did you know also born today was Abraham Lincoln,
I did know that one.
the rapper Gucci Mane. I know you're a big Gucci Mane guy.
Can't say I
Charles
know who that is.
Darwin, Charles Darwin, Josh Brolin, and Bill Russell, former Boston Celtics great. And not only that, Abraham Lincoln and Charles Darwin, born on the exact same year and the same day. Do you think they knew each other as they grew up?
I don't know. I mean, I think they were really focused on some very different things. But
Yes.
who knows?
Who knows? That's an unanswerable question that we're not going to solve today. But what we are going to do today, Jonathan, is talk about some trends, some outlook on the automotive industry for 2025. You and I were both at NADA in New Orleans, or as some people were calling it, SNOLA. That was a very fun, interesting experience, wasn't it?
It didn't think I'd ever see snow like that in New Orleans at an
Yeah,
NA, but it was a great event.
once in a lifetime experience for sure. And one of the hot topics, of course, which has been a trend of NADA itself, is technology and talking about all the latest innovations and opportunities to improve the transaction from a technology perspective. But, Jonathan, one thing I wanted to start with you is in some of the conversations we've been having with our dealers, both at NADA and, you know, throughout the years, is the importance of culture and the opportunity to create a culture in your store. And I would suggest that's probably even more important, or one thing that you should address before you even think about technology. Would you agree with that?
I would totally agree. Culture, the culture of your store and your associate experience and your customer experience has always been one of the most important things, if not the most important thing. And I think sometimes when we go to events and we look at technology, and there's a lot of really cool, special new things out there, and sometimes we feel like those are, that's the silver bullet, that's the tool that I'm going to take back to my store, and it's going to, solve a lot of problems, it's going to improve the customer experience, it's going to help with my employee retention, or whatever problem you're trying to solve. And what I would say is you really got to dig a lot deeper than that, and before you pick out that technology, really chart, what do you want your culture to look like? What is the strategy of your store? What do you want your customer experience to be, your associate experience to be? What do you want your processes to look like? And then go find the technologies that help enable that. And I think oftentimes we do that in reverse, especially in the last, I'd say, decade in the industry, is we go out and find a technology and then try to build the processes around that and the culture around that. And I think that's a bad strategy. And we see it a lot where a new technology comes in and it fails. And it's not because the technology is not good. It's because the culture and the process and the strategy was never thought through ahead of time.
Yeah, it's a great point, and something we talked recently with Eric Flo, the COO of Flow Automotive, because he's looking at implementing, and many dealers are looking at implementing kind of a centralized approach to how they do business, especially as they grow and expand and try to onboard new stores. If you don't know your why, if you don't know what you're trying to instill as a culture among all of your stores, all of these other things are not going to fall into place, because it starts with having everyone bought in to the process, everyone bought into what do we want to be known for, and then you kind of figure out the things from there.
Yeah, totally agree. And another, I'll give another plug for the walk around. That conversation with Eric was a really good conversation. Talk about a guy who's really dialed into the industry and is really taking a unique approach. So I would encourage everybody to listen to that when you get a chance.
So let's get into it a little bit more, Jonathan. Technology is all around us. We understand that it has changed the landscape of the transaction. And one of the things we're seeing come up over and over again, and it's all over our business, is the power of AI. What was your take on where we are with AI today, and where do we think it's going?
I mean, to go back to NADA, there was a lot of buzz for really the last 2 years around AI. I don't think this was kind of the first big year of it. And there's a lot of tools, a lot of vendors, really coming to market with some innovative solutions for dealers that use AI, that use machine learning to really improve different parts of the sales process. And the first thing I'll say is like, I'll go back to what we talked about before, and that is, knowing what you want your process and your experience and your culture to look like is number one. But then when you look at kind of these tools, what we're seeing is the ability to take your data and really understand it and get your team actionable insights when it comes to marketing, when it comes to sales opportunities, when it comes to service opportunities. AI is a great tool and a great way to enable your people to be more efficient and to provide a better experience. But it's a tool. It's not the complete solution at this point. And I don't know that it will ever be.
Right. And I think the other thing it reinforced is the need for training. And even though we have several different providers out there, as you mentioned, that are impacting innovation and improvements on parts of the business, like inventory management and pricing. Being able to understand your data and get more insights from it is one thing, but then having the people to be able to do the right thing with those insights is taking it to the next step. And training continues to be a primary theme that I think all dealers are looking for and looking to solve for.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think, but when you put those two things together, actionable insights, the ability to take data and get to what you're looking for very quickly, to know, hey, here's what I really need to focus on from a training perspective is really cool. And you think about, like you brought up inventory management, things that used to take hours now take seconds.
Right.
When I'm thinking about, hey, what cars perform the best from a profitability standpoint on the front end and the back end? What cars perform the best when I'm thinking about customer retention and fixed operations profitability, etc. And then like, where do my employees, where do my associates in my dealership need help? And the ability to look at performance data and identify, hey, this specific associate needs help in this part of the process, is pretty cool.
But again, it goes back to what you said at the beginning, where making sure you have a defined process and then trying to implement the right tools to add efficiency, to add effectiveness, so that your people could deliver cars in a better way and meet the customer's expectations.
Yes.
So let's now talk a little bit more about F&I. After all, that is something near and dear to our hearts. What are some things that we're seeing in terms of innovation on the F&I side of the business?
There's a lot, Mark. There's the obvious place I'll go quickly is technology, and we're seeing the same technology that's helping to enable the sales process and a lot of things we just talked about is helping to enable the F&I process, regardless of who's facilitating it, whether it be a traditional F&I manager, a salesperson, or another role in the dealership, to be able to get the right information from a lending standpoint in front of the dealership associate and the customer from an F&I protection product standpoint as well. So we're just seeing a lot of advances there that are going to help speed up the process and make that process smoother. The other thing is, we've seen a lot, and I'm going to talk about the process a little bit. We've seen more and more consumers, and really every consumer at this point, let's call it what it is starting their car buying process before they show up at the dealership. And up until the last few years, F&I was kind of the last piece in the process that we had, as an industry, had kind of held on to. And that part of the process was still starting in the dealership. Well, that's not starting in the dealership anymore either. And so the need to have the right processes in place, the right tools in place for your customers and for your staff to enable your customers to start the process earlier, whether it be a credit application, lending options, and even F&I protection products earlier in the process prior to the customer showing up at the store is really important. And we're seeing a lot of success with the dealers that are doing it. One really unique thing we're doing, Mark, is our consumer strategy, where we've piloted with a few stores where we're actively marketing to customers who are looking for a vehicle earlier in the process, which is a little bit crazy, right? Like we're taking an advertisement for a vehicle service contract, Mark, if you were looking at a Camry at your local dealer and you're on social media that night, you're starting to get information around, hey, Mark, when you make a decision on the Camry, here's some other things you could consider.
Yeah, and I think, Jonathan, to that point, when we started to talk with dealers about this approach, we started to hear some skepticism. And I think naturally and rightfully so, the immediate reaction was, hey, I don't want to do anything to jeopardize the sale of the car because I want to make sure that is, you know, the main focus and we get that completed before we even start to talk about protection products or, positioning F&I to the customer. And I think we've been able to show that, hey, there is some validity to that. We're certainly not suggesting that we shift focus away from the sale of the car, but I think we found a way to marry the two so that the customer starts to learn and become educated and be able to then facilitate the transaction much more seamlessly.
Yeah, it's about enhancing the process and making the process more transparent, more consumer friendly. It's not about sidetracking the process or getting in the way. But Mark, I was one of those skeptics as somebody who learned the car business in a very traditional way as far as car sales. Like the thought of bringing up a service contract before you've even test driven the car or agreed on numbers on the car, like that was a little uncomfortable for me. But what we're seeing is consumers are engaging with this information. They're excited to see it. They're very interested in it. And we're seeing positive results in the sales process because of that.
And I also think what we've been able to show is that customers want to learn and want to interact, want to understand in different channels. So, yes, this is still a largely human led process and a conversation that a salesperson needs to have. But I think we're seeing strong engagement when it comes to learning about those products on a website or a text
Definitely.
message
Definitely.
or anything that can be considered a part of every other retail environment. When you think about digital selling, that just lends itself completely to our side of the house as well. No, we want to make this interactive. So if you're out there listening to us or watching us on LinkedIn Live, please submit some questions. We're happy to answer things along the way, and give you some of our opinions and what we're seeing. But let's move on, Jonathan, if you will, to the fixed ops side of the business. It's always great at NADA to see how much focus is being placed on service. It's definitely an opportunity for our dealers to maintain or improve customer retention. Profitability opportunities certainly exist on the service side. What are we seeing? What are some things that we think are going to make it a very interesting year on the fixed ops side of the business?
Yeah, I think we're spending a lot of time with our dealers really focusing on the customer experience on the fixed operations side of the business. And I think like if you look at what people are talking about in the industry, you look at when you think automotive process, retail processes, often your head goes to the sales side, right? It goes to the sales process. There's a lot of buzz around technology. We've talked about it today on the sales side, around processes on the sales side. And sometimes the fixed operation side gets a little kind of left out of the conversation. But we all know how important fixed operations is to the overall health of a dealership, whether it be overall profitability is the obvious thing, but also customer retention. Everybody's heard this before, but the sales department sells the first car to the customer and the service department sells the rest if you retain that customer. So really looking at how do we make that service process smooth, like we've really focused on making the sales process smooth. And so what do I mean by that? We're seeing the introduction of a lot of technology utilized on the service department to improve that customer experience to make it smoother. One of the biggest things are video MPIs and being able to interact with that service advisor or that technician regardless of where you are. So if the customer drops their vehicle off, being able to interact with the dealership via video, via SMS, to talk about kind of next steps for their car, to talk about what repairs that they need, which is obviously a great experience for the consumer, but we're seeing very positive financial results for the dealer as well.
Jonathan, we have a question that came in. How can dealerships attract and retain top technician talent? That's a good question. Um, so, something that we've heard quite frequently at NADA and also is having a recruiting strategy and a training plan. I think what technicians want to see is that they're going to grow, right? They're going to have the opportunity to advance in their careers, to learn, to become more skilled. So, one aspect to attract top talent is to make sure you have a very robust training program that once that talent is in your store that they're going to be able to continue to advance and grow in their career.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think the other thing that we really have to think about when we think about technician talent, but this applies to a lot of other areas of the dealership as well, is we've really got to have a build strategy when it comes to talent in a lot of cases. And what I mean by that is there's a limited amount of top technician talent out there. And so you may not be able to find everything you need. So we're seeing and we're working with our dealers to really get creative when we think about how do I have top technician talent? And that means having programs where they can start at a very entry level and build into that, top or master technician level. That means working with community colleges and other educational institutions in your area to support training programs for technicians. It's a long-term play, but the dealers that have committed to this, if you look over several years, you see a lot of benefits and a lot of good results from that. And then to add on to what Mark said, really making sure that once you build that talent, your associate experience is stellar. your training program is stellar, your compensation is in line, your benefits package is in line. Because if you spend all the time and effort to build that talent, you want to make sure you retain them as well.
One of the
Yes.
trends, one of the insights that we were learning at NADA, it what came from one of our friends, Jonathan Smoke, uh, very respected economist from Cox Automotive. We've got a great podcast coming out with him as well, coming soon. But really, the takeaway I got from Jonathan Smoke was positive outlook for 2025 and what dealers can be excited about in terms of the market, in particular, consumer sentiment. Now we know actually we're doing this live after the news that broke earlier today about inflation still remaining relatively high. Um, Rate cuts are not as expected to happen as often as probably some others would like. So affordability still remains a very, very difficult issue. The average cost of a vehicle is higher than it's ever been, both on the new and the used side. So, Jonathan, can you share with us some of the perspectives and the positivity that dealers can continue to look forward to in 2025?
I mean, I think there's a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement. I mean, you laid out, some headwinds that we're going to have and some challenges, and there's certainly some unknown out there, but it's overwhelmingly positive. We've got a lot of momentum. We're starting to see a lot of things stabilize. Where inventory is coming back, to levels we haven't seen in 4 or 5 years. We're starting to see more incentives come from the OEMs. You mentioned affordability. Yes, it's still a concern, but definitely starting to see some improvement there. With incomes continuing to rise, with interest rates starting to stabilize, hopefully go down a little bit. And those incentives that I brought up earlier. And the other thing that we're seeing in a lot of the surveys that are out there is dealers, our industry as a whole, is getting better um, at satisfying customers, and customer satisfaction in the process has been improving over the last few years. Of dealers have gotten more flexible with their processes, made it a little bit easier, made the process a little bit shorter. So that's an exciting thing as well. The other thing I'll say is there's, I might be saying this, and a dealer may be hearing this and say, wow, like that's exactly me. But if you're in certain parts of the country or you are working with certain OEMs right now, that story may look a little bit different. And so, I wouldn't say that it's perfect for everybody. There's definitely challenges, and with some OEMs in some parts of the country, there's bigger challenges than others. But overwhelmingly, we're looking forward to a really good year, and so are dealers.
Well, Jonathan, I could spend all day with you, but it is your birthday. I know you've got big, big plans, big party. I'm
Another
not sure
another
I
few
got
meetings, Mark.
I'm not sure I got an invitation, but that's okay. What I will say to wrap us up is if you want more insights in terms of what's happening in the business on the F&I side, we've got a new automotive trends report that's out there. And you could look at this as kind of an essential tool to helping you understand the outlook on 2025, results from 2024, some things that we discussed here today. So encourage you to download that as well as continuing to listen to us, of course, on the Walk Around podcast. As we mentioned, there'll be some really insightful episodes coming out that we recorded at NADA. But in addition to that, we've got Rita Case coming out. As I mentioned, we've got Eric Flo, Jonathan Smoke, Sam Dark of the Ziegler Automotive Group, a whole host of other really interesting guests that's just going to add some valuable learning about the business. Jonathan, Jordan, happy birthday. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
Mark.
joining us. Always great to talk to you. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. We'll see you.